Okay, on this week's edition of the Penn State Blitz, it's unbeaten Penn State, unbeaten Minnesota. We're going to talk about Penn State's place in the national playoff rankings. They're number 4, kind of a surprise. Also, Penn State's got a big challenge in the Golden Gophers. What's the bigger worry? Is it the offensive line of the Golden Gophers or the receivers, or is it the start time? Also, Penn State will be without starting defensive tackle Antonio Shelton. Will the backups be ready to go against a very good offensive line? And as always, it's going to conclude with the Penn State Mailbag. You talked about this before the rankings were announced. You thought there was a chance Penn State could be number 4. Defending champion Clemson is number 5. Did this shake out the way you thought it would be?
Yeah, the start of the show didn't, though. I thought you were going to throw your Minnesota preseason prediction in my face right out of the gate, Bob. I'm surprised that we didn't get that far in the open. But that's okay. I know we're going to get there eventually.
I'm a professional, Greg.
Yeah, we know that, but I just thought you'd get to it sooner.
I just want you to admit that I was right. And
you were right.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no
That's
way.
all I needed.
These guys,
a little validation.
They'll get the audio out and play it back, and it will not sound good on my behalf. But with the college football playoff, I guess I was less surprised that Penn State was 4 and Clemson was 5, but I didn't quite understand then, and Rob Mullins was asked this on his conference call following the ESPN broadcast, that if every strength of schedule and strength of record metric puts Penn State's strength of schedule above Clemson and above Alabama. And if you're putting Penn State, which he said they did, over Clemson only because of the strength of schedule, don't you have to put them over Alabama? Then I think this is where the committee gets a little hung up on the criteria and why nobody can ever figure out what they're going to do, because they use different things for different teams in different situations in different weeks. So I guess that's a long way of saying, if you're Penn State, you're obviously thrilled to start at number 4, but it's a moving target every single week, and it doesn't mean you're guaranteed to stay there. However, to win out, they'll be number 4, probably be higher than number 4 if they would win out, of course, because that would put them up, with a win over current number 1 Ohio State.
They're going to be number 1 if they win out.
Right. So I guess the long and the short of it is, if number 4 now won't matter if you win out. But I think it's a good place to start if you would lose to Ohio State. But, of course, I got to get through Minnesota first.
When you were talking about Penn State possibly being 4th, did you think Clemson would be 5th, or did you think it would be Alabama?
No, I thought Clemson would be 5. I just think that, and the UNC loss, or I'm sorry, the close UNC call. Win was something that has been thrown at them as a negative so far this year. But at some point, that ACC schedule is so brutal, and you can only beat who you play. I get that. But at the same time, if you're comparing this many unbeaten teams, and there's always this many unbeaten teams to compare, there won't be as many by the time the final reveal happens in early December. But, yeah, Clemson there right now does make a little bit of sense. I think they wanted to reward Penn State for its start. I don't know if it's knocking Clemson as much as it is rewarding Penn State for being 8-0, beating Iowa, beating Michigan. I know Penn State fans may not like it, but they called Pitt a good win too. So you need the Panthers to keep winning then if you're Penn State.
Do you think the committee valued Penn State's win at Iowa almost a little bit more impressively than their home whiteout win against Michigan?
Yeah, I think so. He mentioned that, the committee chair mentioned that a couple times between his ESPN talk and his conference call, just the fact that they went to a ranked team and earned a road win. And not every program they're being compared against has one of those on their schedule.
Okay, let's move along. Big game Saturday. We're going to be there. Minneapolis, gorgeous at this time of year. Slight chance of snow, but I'm not worried. I know you're not worried.
Joe Herman
might be a little bit worried. Penn State's about a touchdown favorite as we talk about this. We'll get to our picks, I think, a little bit later. But when you look at the Minnesota Golden Gophers team and PJ Fleck, who just got a big contract extension, James Franklin kind of went out of his way to talk about the offensive line that Minnesota has. Real young, real big. They have a 400-pound right tackle. Their wideouts are huge, and also the early start time. When you kind of process all of this, what jumps out to you as maybe the biggest obstacle facing Penn State?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably twofold. It's the loss of Antonio Shelton and not knowing how that depth at defensive tackle, which is really good, but maybe not as battle tested as you would like it to be. I mean, PJ Mustipher's seen a lot of time, but after him, if you're only going to give, 15 more snaps to Windsor, I get a little bit confused when he talks about, the math doesn't make sense because Windsor's going to be out there anyway as a starter. So I can understand how Mustipher would get 15 more snaps. And I know that they rotate those guys and that, you're not going to take Windsor off the field as much, but you're still going to have to increase some time for Fred Hansard or Judge Culpepper.
The judge.
Right, yes. That could be a good post-game headline. We'll have to wait and see. But, I mean, I think it's that just – Minnesota's, average darn near 300 yards rushing a few times this year. Will they try and James Franklin's worried about time of possession. Will they try and line up and run it down their throat? And will they be able to? And I'm not so sure about that, even without Antonio Shelton. To me, you need John Reed and Trent Gordon to be healthy. It sounds like they will be because Tanner Morgan and that very good trio of receivers could end up being the difference makers on Saturday.
Yeah, I think what really troubled James was Minnesota has stayed on schedule most of the season. By that, not a lot of negative plays. They're exactly 50% on third down. And one of the reasons they're so good on third down is when they're in third down, it's usually third and short. And when they do throw, the quarterback, Tanner Morgan's real good on those skinny posts and slants to those big wideouts who can use their size advantage. I think that is really a matchup that I'm going to watch. Penn State has struggled at times, either on third down, giving up penalties or giving up big plays. You look at the Iowa game, they won it 17-12. Late in that game, John Reed had a chance to kind of seal the deal. They converted a long touchdown pass over him. These receivers, I think, are even bigger than Iowa's wideouts. I think that's a legit concern. I'm not sure that Reed's 100%. But if they let Morgan stand back there and throw on time, I think trying to slow those guys. Also, they have to tackle better in space. In the Michigan game, they played well for a while, but Michigan started to get back in the game when they missed some tackles. I think the wideouts are really going to be an issue for Penn State if the game, especially if it's close in the balance.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's, I think, when you look at Marquise Wilson and Keaton Ellis, who to me are probably 1A and 1B, and then Tariq Castro Fields is a 2. But in terms of being aggressive and going for the ball and then securing it, are those guys getting beat from time to time? Yeah, but I think they're also your most likely guys to make a play on a ball that you wouldn't expect them to. So, if you can get to Morgan, you can't let him sit back there and be Kenny Pickett, throw 52 times and not be pressured, more than 75% of those throws. So, you get after them, you get them off schedule, and, you score early, and that's your key to success. Make them be in a situation they have been in before. They've had to come back in some games this year, albeit not against anybody quite on Penn State's level or even close to it, really. Bob, the thing that maybe shocked me most is that Minnesota has yet to face a first-team quarterback for an entire 4 quarters. They've had a couple where the guy's gone out in the first half. Sometimes they haven't started at all. So this Minnesota defense, which we aren't really talking about a whole lot, is – well, how are they going to stop Penn State? I don't know if they'll have some good answers if Penn State can get its playmakers in space.
Now, we know the Penn State fan base is excited about the number 4 ranking in the playoff, rankings. They're still number 5 in the rankings that don't really matter.
Right.
But you asked James about kind of, do you get excited about that? Do you address it with the team that you guys have a good spot in the rankings? And he wasn't having any of that. Do you think that the team is going to kind of be able to stay focused on Minnesota? James put out a tweet saying right after they were announced they were 4th, Minnesota, and you expected that Minnesota. But if you're a Penn State player, are you not kind of starting to think about the big picture? Can you kind of stay focused just on winning on the road Saturday?
Yeah, there were a few guys that had put some things out on social media about where Penn State was, and that's to be expected. I think what helps is that you're not going to play a team that's not ranked or a team that's 6-4 or something like that. You're not having them come to Beaver Stadium and maybe you overlook them. You're going on the road to play another ranked team, and they really haven't had letdowns with any way, shape, or form in the James Franklin era in terms of the quote unquote trap spot and things like that. So I think they will stay focused, but I do think there's a benefit to going to play another ranked team. I thought Minnesota was a little bit lower than I thought. 17 was a little bit low, I thought. But, if they keep it close, they'll move up. Conversely, if Penn State earns a victory in convincing fashion, it'll be another ranked win. So time will tell. But yeah, I would be surprised if focus and motivation are an issue on Saturday.
Okay, so before we talk a little bit more about Penn State's defensive line and PJ Mustipher, I think there's some things you want to say to our audience about the video.
You remembered, that's right. So if you're listening to the Penn State Blitz podcast on Penn Live.
And the podcast, right.
Don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe. Give us your feedback. Let us know what you think of the number 4 ranking in the first college football playoffs. Rank us, rate us, subscribe, all those good things.
We are not ranked that high.
I don't think so. No, the committee didn't really care for last week's effort. But like, rate, subscribe. You can get it every Thursday. If you subscribe, you actually get it early, I'm told. So make sure you hit that button wherever you get your audio. And if you're listening to the video and watching the video, youtube.com/allpennstate, you can find us there.
That was perfect. PJ Mustipher, second-year player, played a lot as a true freshman. Has really helped him this year, made a big play at Iowa. We're going to see a lot of him at defensive tackle with Shelton out. Minnesota's offensive line is huge. We talked a little bit about the backups, but are there any other solutions for Penn State's defense to kind of help minimize the loss of Shelton? Etor Gross-Matos can play inside if he has to. He said on Tuesday he's good with wherever they want to play him. But you're right. If they're on the field, they were on the field for 82 snaps against Michigan. If they're on the field for, say, 65, 70 against Minnesota, Greg, how does the math work in terms of Mustipher and Robert Windsor's snaps? Are they at 50?
Yeah.
And you give 15 to 20 to the backups?
Yeah, I think that's about right. And I think you try and the big key for me in this game will be, is Blake Gilligan on? Is there any wind concerns in Minnesota? I haven't seen any yet. I don't think that's going to be a problem. But, is this a consistent game for him where he's, as he's done almost all year, pinning teams inside the 20, inside the 10, inside the 5 when Penn State's forced to punt and try and flip field position? Because, if you let these younger defensive linemen sort of pin their ears back and not worry about maybe some of the finer points that you have to worry about at different parts of the field, if a team's trying to get off their own goal line and you're telling Judge Culpepper or, Fred Hansard, I don't know if Damian Barber will travel, we'll see. But if you're telling one of those guys to not really worry too much about game plan specific things and everything else and just go do what they've been doing since they were middle schoolers playing football and go find the ball, just charge right upfield, I think you can take away some of the concern you might have about the inexperience they have in big games, road games, and things like that. So, they're struggling to sell tickets, so I don't know if it'll be a loud, noisy environment. I'm sure if Minnesota gets a lead, it will be. But to me, I think that the special teams could, again, be a key thing. If Penn State's forcing Minnesota to start and go 80, 85 yards every time, it could take a lot of pressure off those guys.
You didn't really think we were going to go through a whole Penn State Blitz podcast without talking about Noah Cain, did you?
No.
We got to at least mention that he didn't play the last 3 quarters at Michigan State. I think he had a bum ankle after starting the game.
Yeah.
James says he's going to start. Just your thoughts on maybe what that might mean.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see what Minnesota tries to do with him early in the game and if that forces Penn State to try and go elsewhere. And what I'm thinking is that they might try and clog the middle of the field, maybe force Penn State to pass a little bit more, get him off the field, and whether that means Journey Brown comes in and they try and stretch the field wide, or whether Ricky Ronnie goes to one of the other guys, I don't know. But, yeah, I'll be curious to see if Minnesota, at some point you can't stop Pat Fryermuth, KJ Hamler, Jahan Dotson, Noah Cain, Journey Brown, whoever the running back is. You can't stop all those guys. Sean Clifford too. So
he can run it a
the
little.
The elusive Sean Clifford, yes. So I'll be interested to see if he's a full 100%, if maybe they, instead of going 2-1-1-1 in the rotation, they maybe just go 1-1-1-1 to start and get all those guys some reps, maybe save Cain his best effort for later in the game. So it'll be interesting to see just exactly how far along 100% looks like for him.
All right, let's wrap up this Penn State Blitz with a little mailbag. We talked a little bit about my brilliant forecasts that Minnesota was going to be a potential problem for Penn State. I was laughed at. I was literally booed off this podcast by you. They're 8-0.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a little credit for that. But what I really want to talk about is we both were right about Vino Rosso
That's right.
in the
Let's not forget about that.
in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Yes.
Hopefully, people were paying attention when he went off at 9-2.
Yeah.
Hopefully, people
Good
made some
odds.
money off
Right.
of us. We didn't make any money off
No,
of us.
but hopefully somebody
But that's
did.
only because
Yeah.
we're dummies.
Right.
As far as the actual Penn State mailbag, what do you have?
Yeah, let's start out with this. When you think back to your thoughts on Minnesota, my belief was that I didn't believe in PJ Fleck. That's exactly why I did not think Minnesota would do this. But clearly he has them going in a direction similar.
7 years on the contract extension?
Yes, that's correct.
So apparently...
Yeah, but that buyout was funky. It's $10 million if he would leave in 2020, and then it drops to like $2 million. So clearly they're mostly worried about him jumping ship off of this big run, and they're trying to protect against that and go from there. But does this Minnesota team remind you of 2016 Penn State at all? And either way, should that be a concern for the Lions on Saturday? Thinking back to how the mindset Penn State used to win that game propelled them to some pretty great things.
Yeah, I don't know that I would make that comparison. One of the reasons I liked them at the beginning of the year is they finished strong last year, and I knew they had 17 starters coming back. So, and I just felt like their schedule's shaped up for. If you look at who they played, they had a chance to get to 7-1 or 8-0 by the time Penn State came to town. They've ran the table. They handled Nebraska. I wasn't sure they would do that. Nebraska stinks. So
there's one preseason.
There is an argument to be made that they really haven't played anyone very good, but I would say that they have shown improvement as the year has gone on. I think that they will be, as long as PJ is there, I think they're going to be a team to reckon with in the Big Ten West, and it'll be interesting to see what he can do recruiting wise if they get to 10 wins or 11 wins this year, and they can get some more players from outside of the Midwest to come to Minneapolis. It's not an easy sell, but he's a really, really good recruiter. I think this is a very interesting game. I do think that Minnesota is better than I think the Penn State fan base perceives, but I don't know how this is going to play out on Saturday morning.
Does the 11 a.m. start time matter at all? Local time, of course, noon Eastern, 11 local. I've gone back and forth in this. James Franklin's been quite okay at pretty much any game time.
Yeah.
And it goes back to sort of the old idea of if you can't get up for a chance to be 9-0 and keep your postseason dreams alive, no matter if the game's at 6 a.m., 6 p.m., sometime in between, sometime after, sometime before, what are we talking about here? So I know that it's a concern, and it predates James Franklin and a lot of Bill O'Brien. It's gone back for a number of years. Bob, I just don't see it being that big of a deal.
I'm with you. I don't think it's going to be particularly cold for November.
For Minnesota standards,
and it's not going to be very windy. I think this is actually, if you're a Penn State player or coach, I think the conditions are pretty good considering how bad they could have been with the wind and the cold. I think they're getting favorable conditions, and if they execute, I think they're going to be tough to beat. I also think Penn State, the way that they played on the road this year, I think bodes well for them in this game. They've started fast against Maryland. They started fast against Michigan State. Iowa was a challenge. They had to work for that. But this environment is not like the Kinnick Stadium environment. I do think I picked Minneapolis to beat Penn State at the start of the year. Spoiler alert, I'm teetering pretty hard on maybe going the other way.
All right, well, let's wrap it up there. If you're listening to the Penn Live Penn State Blitz podcast, we'll be back after this break. If not, if you're watching the video, youtube.com/allpennstate, we will be back with a second video there, picks and predictions for Minnesota week.